The Miami Dolphins are playing a pivotal make or break road game against the Los Angeles Rams on the road on Monday night in front of a national audience. Season's on the line. Season's been on the line all season, but this time I really mean it. Barry Jackson joining us from the Miami Herald. Barry, if the Miami Dolphins suffer a loss to the Los Angeles Rams and go to 2-7, can we officially pull the plug on the season?
Yes, it is all over because there is no way they run the table then. And you just look at what's left. Can you realistically expect them to be 2-7 and then beat the Jets twice, win at Houston, beat San Francisco at home, win against Cleveland in the cold, where obviously they usually shrink, win at Green Bay on Thanksgiving night? When is that ever going to happen? So yes, we can close the door if they lose, but if they win, I see a window, Omar. I see a little bit of a window.
There's a
maybe
pulse.
if you win, and maybe then if you win the San Francisco game, you beat the Jets twice, maybe you sneak into the playoffs at 9-8. There is a very narrow path, I think, if they win, because the offenses look good with Tua, because they have Sealer back. The run defense has improved. So I see a little window, but with at 2-7, if you lose on Monday, there's just no margin for error at all. And I would say a 1% chance at best they would make the playoffs if they fall to 2-7.
Let me ask you this question, because I every time I bring it up to a player, I keep hearing, hey, we did it in 2021. We did it with a lesser team. They didn't say that. Those are my words. But Tua Tagovailoa, as a starting quarterback, led the Dolphins to 8 of 9 wins after they started the season 1-7. Got back into the playoff picture. Obviously, they fell short in Tennessee, had that big blow up with Brian Flores in the locker room that I believe led to the split of Flores and Tua. Do you see parallels to this season to that season?
I would, because this is a better roster, except for one thing. It's unfortunate the NFL will not allow them to play New England every week. If the NFL said you can play New England every week the rest of the year, then yes, they could win out. And they do have those 2 relatively easy games coming up after this one, home to the Raiders, home to New England. So if you win on Monday and then win those next 2, you're 5-6, and then you definitely have a puncher's chance. But the problem is the schedule in December. That's why even though there are parallels to that year, and even though this is a better roster, I still don't see any great likelihood of them winning out or winning 7 of 8 or something like that, simply because of the difficulty of the schedule down the stretch. Look, Jets are not a great team, but I think it's unrealistic to think you're going to sweep them because they do have good players. They did play well against Houston last Thursday night, a week ago Thursday. So if you split with them, you're going to have to win 2 games you're not expected to win, whether it's at Green Bay, whether it's at Houston, whether it's home to the Niners.
If I make the argument to you, Barry, that this team can beat anybody on their schedule, you would counter with what?
They can theoretically, but are they likely to win in Houston? No. Are they likely to beat San Francisco at home? I would say probably not. Are they likely to win in Green Bay? Probably not. Are they likely to close the season with a win in the Jets? Maybe 30% chance, but clearly they'll be underdogs in that game. So it's improbable. The odds are very much against them. But if they win on Monday, there is that path.
Mm-hmm. I keep hearing all we got to do is get on a win and get the snowball rolling down the hill. And this is from good players, good leaders. I respect it. I don't think it's very likely, but I think that there's a possibility. I will say this to you, and I want your counter. They have not played up to their potential. Agree or disagree?
Absolutely. It's an underachieving team at 2-6. You know what stuns me, Omar? McDaniel. He's going to fall under 500 if they lose on Monday. And we both give him all the credit in the world for salvaging Tua and for making him a good NFL quarterback. He will never get enough credit for that. I think he's generally a good coach, but he certainly bears some responsibility, because if they fall under 500 with him, then you can look at the body of work for 2.5 years and say, this team has underachieved under him, even though he turned Tua into something good. We wish that were in the case. He's a hell of a nice guy, but I think you can point in a lot of different directions. One reason I'm not as optimistic this year, Omar, as I was in terms of the comparison 2 years ago when they went on that streak down the stretch is just the lack of a pass rush. I just don't know how you compensate for Jalen Phillips. Even if Bradley Chubb comes back at some point in December, he's not even practicing yet. Are you going to get an effective Chubb? To me, the key is this. If what we saw from Chop Robinson last week is the start of something, if he becomes an effective NFL pass rusher, if he is able to string together 4 or 5 sacks, a bunch of pressures in this next month, if Ogba can play through the biceps and give you pass rush, and if Anthony Walker is able to play more effectively than David Long was this season, then I think you've got a decent chance, because I think the offense is going to be fine. I think. So to me, it's all about the defensive front seven. You feel good about Sealer and Campbell, but can you get good enough play at linebacker, inside linebacker with Brooks, who's played well but had a big mistake last week, and Walker, who's taken over for David Long, and can you get enough pass rush from a group of edge players that has produced the fewest sacks of any group of edge players in the NFL? They have 4 sacks among outside linebackers this season, Omar. That's a
total on the season.
Low number, right?
And total on the season, only the Atlanta Falcons have less sacks than the Miami Dolphins. I will say something paralleling to 2021 that I think is going to stump you, and you're going to say, oh, yes, I remember that. Remember, in that season, they moved Jerome Baker from inside linebacker to outside linebacker because of similar issues where they were not getting enough pressure. And that led to a turnaround of the defense. Now, I will make this argument that I believe that there is a linebacker on the roster that you can put outside and have him pressure, maybe on third downs, that can give you an athleticism that you do not have right now with Ogba. And
I'm guessing Duke Riley's that guy. Is it Duke Riley?
It is not.
Really? Well, we know it's not Channing Tindall because they've already ruled out ever playing him outside. Joe Barry, I asked about Channing Tindall. He said he cannot, and Anthony Weaver said he cannot be an outside linebacker. He's not big enough in our system. So who is it?
I'm sorry. Channing Tindall is not much much smaller than Duke Riley. Channing Tindall is not much smaller than Chop Robinson. It is Channing Tindall. And I'm not saying that this guy can be a savior. What I'm saying is, now also Cameron Good is coming back. I think he's a little bit ahead of Bradley Chubb, but I'm not thinking Cameron Good's going to come in here and be a savior either. I'm surprised that they haven't gone to kick the Melvin Ingram tires yet again, considering that they've got absolutely nothing right now coming off the edges. But I will say this. Between Bowser, Chop Robinson, Emmanuel Ogba,
Kamara, I guess, is their 4th. Obviously, Quentin Bell. So you have 5 guys, but you haven't gotten enough. Bowser, he had some good years in Baltimore before the knee injuries. He just hasn't been particularly effective here. It hasn't been a debacle. He hasn't been awful against the run, but he's giving very little.
I think the body is betraying him, but that's what happens when you have a 30-year-old veteran. At some point, I think that they've got to go maybe try to poach somebody young off another team's roster. But, this team acts like the inn is full. The hotel is absolutely full. They cannot find any roster spots for anybody because the talent is so good. However, yesterday they did cut Brandon Peely, a guy that they've invested 2 years in. I think they cut him with the hope that he can not be claimed and come back on the practice squad. We shall see. They've signed some other defensive linemen. Obviously, they looked at that what they're getting from Peely and what they're getting from these other defensive linemen on the practice squad and said, "Hey, we can make do with this." But that's not they created that roster spot for one of 2 reasons: to either elevate River Craycraft, which I'm sure we both suspect will happen. River Craycraft, Tua is a big fan of River Craycraft. If he hadn't suffered an injury, he'd probably be the number 3 receiver right now, a very effective blocker, a wide receiver who knows all 3 receiving spots. I think he's going to immediately jump ahead of Odell Beckham. Or Patrick McMorris. Safety happens to be a position of need, a position of concern. They opened up his window to come off the IR earlier this week. He's practiced all week, and he can help you on special teams. And we all know that leakage on special teams caused by injuries to starters and those backups being elevated waters down the special teams play, and this special teams unit cannot afford any watering down.
Right. A couple things on McMorris, Omar. I asked McDaniel yesterday what intrigued them about him that made them want to use one of their 8 designated to returns. He said he was just further along as a rookie than you see a lot of rookie safeties are. Doesn't make a lot of mistakes. But at the same time, McDaniel said more likely we see him next week or beyond than this weekend. So I agree with you. He's got value as a special teams player. I don't think we see him this week. I would be surprised if Craycraft is not the guy to fill the open spot on the 53. I think it's natural to bring him back and put him on the 53. Then you have 2 elevations. One is obviously the long snapper, Addington, because Blake Ferguson has to sit out one more game. And by the way, McDaniel said yesterday that Blake Ferguson will be back long snapping for this team. So that's 6 of the 8 maximum designated to returns will be filled once you bring back Blake Ferguson and Tyler Huntley, who they've also said they're likely going to bring back. So the other elevation is going to be interesting. Is it going to be Neil Farrell, the defensive tackle, who took snaps away from Peely the last couple of weeks? He played more than Peely. Is it going to be a backup offensive tackle like Ryan Hayes because Austin Jackson is out? And by the way, we're about 10 minutes into the podcast. We haven't mentioned Tyreek Hill. We need to give people a quick update on that. So Hill sustained an injury to his wrist in a preseason practice against the Commanders, according to NFL Network's Tom Pelissero. He tweaked it this week. He practiced fully on Thursday, but apparently sustained the tweaking of it Thursday during practice. Then Friday and Saturday sat out. McDaniel said he's neither optimistic nor pessimistic whether he will play. NFL Network said it is truly a game-time decision. Now, at the same time, we know Tyreek typically plays through pain and discomfort. I'd be a little surprised if he doesn't play, but I won't be shocked because this does appear to be more serious than the foot injury, which came up a couple of weeks ago midweek. One other note on this, Tyreek taped a video from the flight to Los Angeles yesterday, seemed in good spirits, hinted that he was going to play, but it wasn't clear, and he didn't
get hurt.
Say that he's going to play. So I feel a little bit of optimism about Tyreek, but certainly no degree of certainty that he's going to play.
I think if Tyreek doesn't play, a lot of elements of your offense will have to change. Teams will change how they address you. Even if Tyreek is out there as a decoy, I think that's important. But we also know that this organization, this regime, this coaching staff, they err on the side of caution. And if they can give you a week's rest, allow your issue to heal and not become a lingering issue, then they will. I remember Tyreek with that wrist. We thought it was a thumb, but I'm glad to know it was a wrist. Tricky. And I remember it was his right wrist, and he went an entire week without catching a football. That's going to be very interesting to see. We've got other issues from an injury standpoint. Javon Holland coming back from the knee injury, practiced this week, got more involved. Do you think that Javon Holland gives this a try?
You know, it's interesting. I was very surprised on Saturday, Omar, that McDaniel said he was optimistic about Holland playing because Holland didn't express optimism when he spoke to us the day before. He said this is going to be a true game time decision. He wasn't sure if he'd be able to play. He's missed one game with the knee. He did make clear to us that this knee injury is in no way related or the same injury as the injury to both knees that he sustained in the Black Friday game against the Jets. I asked him, are you frustrated because you've missed now 7 games since actually it's been 6 games since that Black Friday game. He's missed 6 games to assorted injuries in the last calendar year. I asked him if he's been frustrated. His answer was, no, I'm not frustrated. He said it's been a learning experience about my body, which was an interesting response. He's a thoughtful guy, so sometimes he gives the answers that you don't expect. So Holland, the fact McDaniel said he's optimistic gives me hope he will play, even though Holland was non-committal. Kohu said he's playing. So he's back. And here's an interesting thing. This is sort of in the weeds for intense Dolphins fans. I'm sort of curious who their number 4 corner is now. If, God forbid, something happens to Ramsey or to Kendall Fuller, I asked this week, is it Storm Duck? Is it Cam Smith? They said it's extremely competitive between those two. So does the undrafted rookie Storm Duck shoot ahead now that he's back from his ankle injury or his calf injury? Does he shoot ahead of Cam Smith, who got his most NFL playing time the last 2 weeks and gave up 9 catches and 10 targets against him? So that's going to be interesting. If, God forbid, Ramsey or Fuller goes out, who plays on the boundary in nickel? Is it Cam Smith? Is it Storm Duck? I'm interested in that. And by the way, I want to ask you something on receiver because we moved past the Tyreek Hill thing. Is this the breakout game for Jaylen Waddle. He did not speak this week. All the beat writers wanted to speak to him. He didn't speak. And the thing I was wondering that I would have asked him had he come out and spoken to us this week is, as he's sitting there, Omar, watching Jamar Chase catch 1,000,000 passes for 1,800 yards on Thursday night against Baltimore, what is Jaylen Waddle thinking? Is he thinking that should be me? Why am I not targeted in this offense? What the hell has happened this year? Is this the game, whether Tyreek plays or not, that Jaylen Waddle erupts and shows you the player he was his first 2 seasons?
I think there's going to be too much attention on him. I'm very puzzled why they can't get out involved, the wide receivers more involved, even though there's this cloud coverage and they say they're taking what defenses give them. Well, yeah, defenses want to give you the underneath stuff. They'll give you the tight ends. They'll give you the passes to the back. I mean, we saw that situation with Buffalo last week. I mean, they just took passes to tight ends and passes to the backs all season. But I do believe that Jaylen Waddle is not the young, spry speedster that we once saw. Tell me the last time you've seen Jaylen Waddle catch a ball deep. It just hasn't happened. So
why, though? Why? He's still young. The speed is still there. That's very worrisome because even though he's capable of the underneath routes, why is he no longer the option on deep passes that we saw? Because if he's not that option, then what's the value of having that high a paid number 2 receiver on your roster?
Hey, he's still 1,000-yard receiver for the first 3 years of his career. He's still a productive player, but we need to see him become more of a possession receiver. We need to see him become more reliable catching the passes. I still think that this offense is going to continue to spread the ball around. I think that's where Tua is completing 70% of his passes. I don't see them stopping. The question is, the concern is you got to still insert the big play. And it's got to be either from the running backs, who teams are giving you 7 in the box, so you should be able to run, or it's got to be from the big play receivers, and we just haven't seen it yet. There is also a more important injury. This guy we absolutely know is not going to play, which is Austin Jackson. I scoured the film yesterday trying to find an instance where maybe he got hurt or a dip in the play of Austin Jackson to see how serious this knee injury might be. Couldn't find it. He played very well, including a great block of Von Miller on that Jaylen Waddle touchdown pass. And I said to myself, man, this guy looks well. So I am suspecting, I don't know if McDaniel addressed it, that there might be a cleanup going on here.
Yeah, I did ask about that with regard to whether it could be a season-ending surgery procedure. So definitely not season-ending, but there could be surgery. He said it has not been ruled out. It'd be interesting to see if they put him on IR. They don't necessarily need the roster spot yet because they released Pilley. They could have Craycraft fill that slot, but they're going to need a roster spot for Blake Ferguson in the next couple of weeks. So you wonder, do they put Austin Jackson on IR now? Is it a 4-week thing?
If they were going to do it, they would do it by today. They would do it.
Right.
They would do it Sunday before the game so he could miss one of the 4 games. I don't think it's that serious. I think if you do get a clean out, that's 2 weeks maybe. Okay. But right now, Kendall Lamb is going to be starting at right tackle. Kendall had a very impressive season last year as the Dolphins starting left tackle. Right tackle is a spot that he's played. He's a swing tackle. But it's not his best spot. But the one thing I always like and admire about Kendall Lamb is he's always ready to go. He's always ready to go, and he's going to put up a good fight and good performance. So I don't too much worry about it. But now, do you concern yourself about the drop-off from the offensive line? They were 1 yard shy of running for 150 yards in 3 straight games. 3 straight games for the Dolphins, setting a new record since 1977. Do you believe that they're going to still be able to sustain that rushing attack with Kendall Lamb in the starting lineup?
I do. I've been so impressed how much the interior of this line has exceeded our expectations. Brewer, to me, arguably, next to Calais Campbell, has been their best offseason acquisition. He's not only improved appreciably as a pass blocker, but he's been every bit the run blocker that everyone thought he was out of Tennessee. And Eichenberg and Rob Jones have been better than serviceable. They've been decent players. The thing I'm curious about is, and hopefully it won't come to this, but if Kendall Lamb has to miss a snap or God forbid if he's injured on Monday night, who's your backup right tackle? Patrick Paul told me he's getting some snaps at right tackle. I asked McDaniel, can he be trusted now at right tackle? McDaniel said, yes, I'm comfortable putting him in the game at right tackle if we need. The other option, if something were to happen to Kendall Lamb, would be moving Eichenberg out to right tackle, where obviously he wasn't especially effective, and then putting Lester Cotton at guard. So I wonder about that. But this offensive line, I've gained a measure of trust in, and this is the one area, as you and I have talked about off camera, where Chris Grier has been validated. They've gotten by, even a little better than gotten by.
Let's be real, they got the last laugh. They got the last laugh on it.
It's the only thing they've gotten the last laugh on, but they have gotten the last laugh on that. You know, one thing that you mentioned earlier was big plays. I want to throw this stat at people because this was just stunning to me on the big play issue. So can you believe, and I wrote about this on MiamiHerald.com in the last couple of days, the Dolphins have only 15 passing plays of 20 yards or longer, tied with New England for the fewest in the league. Who would have ever thought we'd be in November with this offense, with Tua, with Tyreek, with Waddle, and they have the fewest 20-plus yard passing plays completed, not attempted, completed in the league. Plays that have gone for 20 yards or more, doesn't necessarily have to be air yards. Last year, they were 8th in that category with 59. They have only 2 passing plays of 40 yards or more this year. Last year, they had 12. But this is extended to the running game too, Omar. Last year, yes, Dolphins were among the top in the league in running plays that were 20 yards or more. This season, they're toward the bottom in that category. So it's both passing plays and running plays. And what I found interesting this week in the discussion with coordinators was this. I asked Frank Smith, the offensive coordinator, can you win a lot of games? Can you score a lot of points without big plays? His answer to me was yes, which surprised me. And he pointed as evidence to what they did against Buffalo. But I think most people would probably conclude that it's just too difficult to string together as many long drives consistently as they did against Buffalo without penalties, without turnovers. Obviously, the Mostert fumble foiled one of those drives last week. So I was surprised that Frank Smith said it wasn't necessary. That's been the hallmark of this offense, the big plays.
Yeah, but I don't think it's a necessary element. If you look at this team when they had Chad Pennington as a starter, when they had Ryan Fitzpatrick as a starter, they weren't big play connoisseurs. They were, let's have sustained drives. Let's drive the 10-play drives and efficiency. And I honestly believe efficiency is a strength of Tua's game, not the big plays. Efficiency, finding the open man, getting the ball out of his hands quickly, throwing the ball in spaces where only his receiver can catch it. So I do believe that they can continue to have sustained success scoring 27 points without the big play. But I do think that the big play is added. And I'm more along the lines of thinking you need the big play from the running game more so than you need the big play from the passing game, because the big play from the running game is going to open up the big play to the passing game. But, you know, that's pretty much on the backs. So, Barry, let's get into our prediction for this game. I'm going to be an optimistic homer. And even though I've sat here week after week and thinking that Tennessee and Arizona and were the weeks that they were going to turn the tide on the season, I think that Mike McDaniel's intimate knowledge of Sean McVay, a guy that he worked with during his time with Washington, is going to help them create a game plan that will allow them to efficiently produce a road win that will start the steamrolling of success with this season. So I'm going to predict a 27-23 Miami Dolphins victory on national TV. And then people will still be able to say Tua has not won a big game because the Rams do not have a winning record.
Right, then the Rams will fall under 500, exactly. So it won't count as a record game against a winning team, and they're 500 now. I'm with you. I think this is the week they break through. And, you know, I've been pessimistic all season, but I think if there's a game where they're slight underdogs, where they can win, this is it, because the Rams defense is vulnerable. They're 24th against the run. They're 27th against the pass. The Dolphins don't have to worry about a mobile quarterback who's going to break the pocket and run for 20 yards against them, unlike the case the past 3 weeks with Richardson and Kyler Murray and Josh Allen. So I see Dolphins 27, Rams 24, something in that range, but they better win Sunday, because the reaction, my goodness, if it's been bad on Chris Grier up to this point with the fan base and the media, if they go in Monday and are not competitive or lose decisively, it's
it's
going to
pulled
be
the plug.
worse than ever. I've not wanted to call this rebuild a disaster or a failure, and I'm still not ready to call it that yet because they did make the playoffs the last few years. But if they fall to 2-7 and this ends up being a 4 or 5 win team, then you're going to have to make the conclusion, obviously, that the rebuild is a failure. I'm not there yet. Monday is the chance to salvage that and also to give yourself a chance to make something of this season. So I guess both picking Rams. You and me both picking Rams.
Absolutely. This is your chance to
salvage. Or both picking Dolphins, I should say.
Yeah. This is your chance to salvage the season, or time to pull the plug and start playing some young players. We will find out what happens on Monday night. The game is on which network, Barry?
It's on ESPN, and locally in South Florida, it's also on CBS 4.
Absolutely. Well, we will see you after Monday night's game, where we'll give you our recap on Tuesday.